Welcome to another week of Reality Nightcap, where we're going to break down the latest episode of The Traitors. And Stephanie, I had a blast watching from start to finish. I gasped, I laughed. There was a couple of tears, maybe too.
It was a really entertaining one and an emotional one, just from beginning to end, starting with such an interesting breakfast. As we know, we have not figured out yet who Carolyn and Danielle chose to murder to their face in this church that was filled with like red and black. It was so dramatic.
So glamorous.
Whose look did you like the most?
I liked Chrishell's. That was a wedding gown, but dyed in red. It was stunning. And it's so funny that you asked about the fashion because turns out people are starting to question about the fashion. We have Mr. Sam Asghari of all people.
We know that he would be our detective MVP because that was so smart. My jaw dropped when he did that.
So smart. So basically they were talking about it was Gabby who was talking about like her experience down there and shared, what was Alan wearing, and then things clicked in his brain was like, "Oh, wait. The traders probably did not see Alan, so they probably did not see obviously what he was wearing." And I'm sitting there going, "Sam's been quiet for how many episodes now and he's speaking up now?" And then he says, "Action speaks louder than words." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm Team Sam at this point."
Yeah, that was so right. I would love to see him get a win like that. And it really did seem like he caught Carolyn by surprise. It is her job because they think that she went in there to think of a cover story. And there's so many details that they could ask about. And that was a really good one to catch her off guard. She did say all black, and that is what he was wearing.
Yeah, I mean, Gabby then said you kind of passed, so I think she let it slide then. But it was funny. Danielle was like freaking out. I mean, she's been freaking out this whole time, but like really was freaking out because she didn't know what to do in that moment.
Who did help Carolyn out a little bit was Tom Sandoval, who started answering the question before Carolyn could.
Tom, but we'll
I think
get
he
to
was just like,
Tom.
I know, I know.
We'll get to Tom. Tom. We'll get to Tom. Okay, so then we're down to the two people who one of them has been murdered, Chriselle or Dylan. Everyone is not knowing who's, who, because like they're saying with Dylan, he picks a lot of different people's, like he's really not a threat, but he also does play the game. And with Chriselle is she's like just a faithful. She's not really helping the game move forward at this point. So at that point, I'm like, oh no, my sweet baby Dylan is gone.
It ended up that they chose
Thank God.
Chriselle because
Thank
apparently
God.
she was just too faithful.
She was adding, of course, like storyline or, just her being the fabulous person that she is. But like, yeah, it was time for her to go.
Coming off that breakfast, everyone is just percolating with ideas because they've been looking at Bob the drag queen and then Wes and then Boston Rob, all these big personalities. And now that they're gone, it's like, who do we look at now? What's left? And they're starting to look at Danielle, a little bit of
Sierra.
Sierra. They're coming back all the way to the coffin of it all. Were you
Yes.
surprised by that?
I was surprised by that, but I also think that they're just kind of grasping at straws at this point. And they're just, I think with Sierra, because you remember in the coffin, she was very just like fearless in her statement. But if you don't know Sierra, that's the thing. Like, I know Sierra from watching Summer House and interviewing her. That's just who she is. It's fight or flight mode. She's always going to pick fight. And that's just kind of the person that she is. So, my thing is, yeah, they just don't know who she is. And that's a bummer.
Yeah, I think one thing working against her is now they know that Rob and Bob were part of the decision-making factor in people to be put in the coffin. And because they're such bold game players, they think that they would make a move of putting a traitor in.
And remember, we saw last episode that her and Rob kind of were forming some sort of like an alliance in a way, and she didn't vote for Rob. And so that's also,
It
I,
makes her look like she's his minion when
yeah,
she probably just was a little bit swayed by him and the way that he was like treating her pretty well. One thing about Sierra, she has clocked that Danielle and Brittany are a tight-knit duo. Like whether they're both traitors, one's a traitor, neither are a traitor, those are two people that are going to be voting together and taking each other to the end, and that's dangerous.
no, because I found it really interesting too, because you have non-gamers. I mean, I know Survivor's a game, but you have like the Big Brother, and those are the two Big Brother alums, and all eyes are starting to point to them because they're like, oh, they know how to game. They don't, like Sierra and Dolores, they're just living their dramatic lives on television. They're not like strategically playing anything. But for you as a Big Brother fan, is it interesting to see the two of them really align now?
I think there probably is a genuine friendship there, and they've repaired some of the rift that we talked about before. But also, if I'm Danny, I want to be bringing Britt to the end because I think that she might trust me. So Brittany might say, if we're the last ones at the fire of truth, let's stop because I believe Danielle. And then Danielle can get her revenge and win that way using the past relationship.
Oh my God, Steph Case.
But Brittany might be doing the same thing. She might be playing kind of a Sandra game like last season, where maybe she thinks Danielle is her traitor angel. And she's like, whether Danielle is a faithful or a traitor, she's going to take me to the end. And then maybe Brittany will be the one that makes the move and tries to cut Danielle. It could be really
Oh,
interesting. I'm not totally sure what's going to happen.
wait, that's so crazy. And we'll talk more about that because at the end, she is brought up again, but I want to talk about the challenge. That was so creepy. I thought last week's was creepy. Last week's was disgusting, but this is just creepy. I just also don't do well with scary things. So half of the group stays at the castle and the other half goes to a haunted dollhouse and they have to go around looking at dolls and listening to them for like a reversed lullaby. And can I just tell you, Tom Sandoval was at the bottom of my list. As I'm watching that, he's starting to creep up and I'm like, "Oh no, what is happening? Why is this so funny?" Like,
What was
oh,
it about him? Was it his musical
it was
aptitude?
his music. I just forgot. Like, I take the hate away from him. He's so ridiculous and it's so funny and he's such good television and he's so silly because he's so serious. But then at the same time, everyone was looking for shields. Everyone was just focused on that. And Tom over there was like doing everyone a solid and actually trying to figure it out. It's really hard for me to say this right now, obviously.
I really did love watching him try to sing backwards. Like the producers really hit it out of the park with this one. I just
It
was
was
cracking up the entire time, and I can't believe how many they actually got.
this is why this is an Emmy Award winning show.
Absolutely. So Sierra is actually the one that does get the shield.
Good for her, but doesn't go
But
very far. We go back to the castle, and people, of course, like every week, they're, really trying to figure out who's a traitor, who they're going to vote for. And I feel like with this week, a lot of people just don't know.
they're just looking all around here. Like there is the camp of people that think it's Sierra, and they're like, whether this is true or not, we just have to test this coffin theory and see what happens. And then Sierra is kind of in a tough spot because she has suspicions, rightfully so, on Danielle, because Jeremy had Danielle's name in his mouth, and then he was in the coffin and died. And then also she's looking at Brittany because she thinks she's been a little bit quiet, and that could be a way for her to be under the radar in Sierra's mind because she knows that these other two traitors that they've caught have been big personalities. So I think that makes sense that someone who's a traitor alongside of them would want to just be like hands off, like under the radar, because that is kind of what Danielle and Carolyn are doing. But I think the problem here is that she's like shooting shots at two different people and she needs like a cohesive plan, like one name that everyone can get behind. And honestly, the most salient name at this point is hers.
Yes, it's hers. So we get to the round table.
Before we can really dig into any of like the meat of it all, Tom Sandoval says possibly the most insane slip of the tongue I've ever heard in my life. And I was dying to hear what you thought about it.
Okay, so remember when I was just like kind of giving him some accolades like 2 minutes ago? It's gone. It's gone at this point. The man said women are more likely to be cheaters, and he meant to say traitors. And this is coming from Tom Sandoval, who cheated on his girlfriend with his coworker on Vanderpump Rules, and it was the biggest scandal of all Bravo ever. And no, Tom, you're more likely to cheat. You're the cheater. Yeah.
I like how everyone and their mom was
Yes.
like, absolutely not, right off the top. Like people who don't even have skin in the game, who don't even normally talk to Tom, were like, excuse me.
And
It
it
was
was so funny because even Sam was like, "You're just burying, like you're just digging even deeper and deeper." Honestly, at that moment, I would have just voted for Tom just to get him out of there.
the traitor should never murder Tom because
Never.
even if he gets to the end, no one's gonna want to split the money with Tom at this point. I feel like Dolores is always going to throw a vote on Tom.
He's never gonna get the money. That's so funny, but that's so true. So then we have next is Sierra, and everyone's, given their reasons why, like we've already talked about. And she really just does not have a solid defense. I think at that point she was just also explaining, fight or flight, and she's a fighter, which I was saying earlier. And I think at this point she's kind of like,
It's hard to go against that because it does make sense that the traitors might want to put someone in the coffin. I do think her best defense was, I think when Ivar said, Rob and Bob probably convinced you, and she was like, no one can convince me. Like, and I think that that's so true. I think these people have gotten to know her and that she's a really independent mind. She says what she thinks. And I don't think that she would be easily swayed by those two traitors. So I think that that is a good point, but I don't think that her arguments against Danielle or Brittany are strong enough at this point to overcome the argument against her, which is just unfortunate. And it's kind of sad to see her in that spot.
so we get to the voting, and Sierra gets voted out. And yes, everyone else learned that she is a faithful. And the crowd goes silent.
Back to
Ugh,
the drawing board.
back to the drawing board. So we do see everyone starting to talk again, and I thought it was really interesting when you had Dylan, Sam, and Ivar in their little like dungeon room, which I just need to point out Ivar and Sam's growing romance. So
Let me
good.
put the helmet on.
When he put the helmet on, I was like, do I look like a warrior? I'm starting to like understand Sam Asghari, and he's a cool guy. So they're chit-chatting and saying basically like likely like statistically the traitors would be two women. And then really like right on the outside of that, you have the traitors,
The two women
Danielle
sitting
and
right there.
Carolyn sitting right there whispering blah 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 blah. And Dylan, our boy Dylan, is hearing things outside. I don't think he heard really anything.
I kind of liked how they turned it a bit on him, like he was the
Yeah,
suspicious one for
that
being
was
in that
good. That
room
was
with the
good.
guys.
Yeah.
So then he feels like he's on the defensive instead of like actually suspecting them, which he should. But he did say that now he's kind of looking at Danielle now and he's wondering, is her acting true? He's been aligned with her for a while, but now he's considering it.
So we go into the turret, and Alan comes in and says, you have an option. You can either murder someone tonight or recruit or seduce them. Seduce
Right.
a person to become the traitors. And immediately Danielle is like, okay, let's bring in a traitor for sure. And Carolyn is like, no, 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 no. I want to murder someone. No, 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 no. And so they're talking back and forth. And it was interesting because, like you were explaining earlier, Danielle was saying, like, let's bring Brittany in because the guys are thinking, or everyone's thinking that it has to be two women. So we need to bring another woman in. What are you thinking in this moment?
This is really confusing to me because my initial thought was that they should kill because at least half the people know that Sierra went home with the shield in her pocket. So there's no shield. So that if they choose to seduce and a traitor joins them and no one gets killed, then they can't play off like, oh, well, they must have taken a shot at the person with the shield because most people know that there's no shield. So they're going to know that someone was seduced. And then they're going to start looking for who they recruited. So if they do recruit someone, it should be someone that they're trying to frame and potentially sell out, in my
Mm.
thoughts.
Okay, because my first thought was like, oh no, no, they need Dylan. I was like, just bring in Dylan. I don't know if
That would squelch his, because he's the one who's thinking, oh, maybe it's Danielle. Then he can't say anything against Danielle if they recruit him.
that's what I was thinking.
What I'm trying to understand with Danielle is does she want to bring Brittany in so that they can all go to the end together and be three female gamers, like she was saying? Or does she want to sell her out as a frame because they're looking for a female traitor to catch and they want to feed him one? Is that
Mm.
person that she wants to sell out Carolyn in that case then?
They were throwing each other under the bus. So as if I was Carolyn, I would be very, very, very careful on letting her bring in Brittany. Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see to see what our traders do next week. But until then, this was so much fun. Bye, guys.
Bye.